Welcome reviewers to the 71st Energies of the Days. I'm just now asking Alexander, because we just had the solar eclipse, is this something that plays a role for you because you're watching solar activities? Has there something been more special than else? Yes, absolutely. It led to that I had made a special live stream to the subject. I talked about the subject also with the background that many media were challenged to report about a possible blackout. And because of this subject was interesting in many ways. I have already addressed that and want to add something to this, to use the opportunity. On the one hand, a solar eclipse is explainable in a scientific way, but in early days it has been a mystery, and it had a big symbolic meaning. In the Middle Ages, at least in our understanding of the Middle Ages, this was not only something that happened and repeated, but here something special happens. The sun becomes dark, and to this fact I pointed, and it is a big symbolism. We don't refer to such subjects anymore so much because we rationalize them away. No, but when you see it in a context with the other things that happened in the last days, then you can see it as something, for example, as something threatening. I've got an article here that shows about dark clouds over Frankfurt. You see the protests there with the European Central Bank, and you see the solar eclipse, and you see there's something unoverseeable for the people, for the person who sees it without evaluation, just some energies. Yeah, in my home there were always clouds. I was looking forward to the solar eclipse, but I couldn't see anything. And there were two parts in Germany, one had blue sky. Could see it. Is this something when the clouds are there you perceive differently, and some don't really see it because of this, and the other ones experience it more intensively without birds singing and so on? Well, I too witnessed the solar eclipse. When it started, we had a totally blue sky, but we had many chemtrails that were to be seen parallel. But within a short time, it became foggy. It was very astonishing to see so many clouds of fog. At the beginning of the solar eclipse, the sky was blue. Relatively blue. And this has a quality of its own. And the human being always perceives and experiences consciously what's in his channels of perception and resonance. And because of this, we've all got a different view of the world. We experience it in different ways. And this applies also to the solar eclipse, but which has a basic symbolism. Yeah, one people experience it like there's nothing special, I just worked as always, as usual. The other one has maybe very intense experiences. You got many responses. I read in blogs, on Facebook, on the comments, whatever. People felt intensively what happened. Yeah, many people perceived it in different ways. Yes, absolutely. Have you got examples of people for who it was very meaningful? Well, I talked to the one or the other one. Some experience it as a scientific phenomenon. Others see it as a mystery and something that at the same time is an expression of certain energetic qualities in this moment. If we regard the sun, which stands for consciousness, and the moon stands for illusion, And this is a clear message in itself. So the illusion is putting itself in front of the sun, but it's temporarily thing which goes over, and it fits well to this time nowadays, because we experience now how they try to push a curtain of illusion in front of the light of our consciousness, but this doesn't work so well anymore. So this is a good symbolism. We got the Kali Yuga, a long time in which we are, a long time of illusion and shadows in front of the light, in front of consciousness. These are bigger circles than this short moment of the solar eclipse, but you can... do you watch the Kali Yuga? Yes, absolutely. Are we at the end? Are we in the middle? Where are we? So this is a very difficult question, because it's always difficult to question from the temporary perspective of a human being. There are very big cycles of millions of years which are not recognizable to us, because the short time period that we witness is much too small and too meaningless to see the whole picture, even if in each aspect, if you see things, it can be explained, but this is something which is in its ending phase, what we find here. So definitely part ends, but if there's another part which leads to such direction or into another depth, we would just have to wait. Things approach us, and we experience things getting into motion with a big tension, and this tension is now produced by a movement in phases of consciousness where we have good access to the qualities behind. And sometimes we fall back and are very strong, trapped in our emotion of being separated. I say it because we are not separate, but we think we are separated. We get into desperation, and then we feel the other side of the development in which we are now. And there were this magnetic field and solar flare activities and the storm after that, I say now. You can see. I have not seen this magnetic field or this northern light. You see, this is a big cosmic complex with magnetic solar influences, which are not just scientifically explainable. They come and they go, but that they point to things, to something, to a bigger change, whatever. We have a very strong sun again in the last days, with strong eruptions, not of the highest category, the X category, but the M category. But how often this goes and the intensity, it was very strong. And at the same time we had days long a big motion in the geomagnetic field, a geomagnetic storm. And today, where we record this show, we have a geomagnetic storm, not so strong, KP5, but last week we had a KP8. This is the second highest measuring level. This was a very strong geomagnetical storm shortly before the solar eclipse, and for me, yes, of course, those energetical impulses and their strong intensity always have a big meaning for us, because they show and point exactly to something that's in motion in ourselves, a strong energetical force. And this energetical force brings things into motion. We experience it with short later, but we experience it, and it's very strong. So I experienced strong cycle of 20 days. The next cycle, so we are now at the start, because the last cycle is behind us. The last cycle maybe produces big impulses in the outer world. Yeah, we have events in the outer world anyway, but can you say in this cycle other events or another quality of events is there to be experienced than that we had the last 20 days? So, as we spoken before, people say, well, every show is resembling to itself, to each other, the energies, but we realize it's something different than last month. Can you qualify, say exactly what's the difference in the energies? Yes. So if we think back into the first shows of energies of the day in German, we talked much about ideological structures that are protected. On many parts this is done now. We are much further now, also on the outer level, which we can witness the easiest, things which come into motion in ourselves are an expression of subjective perception. So others can doubt that and say, well, this one interprets it this way. But those outer things we watch, they have something in common for us. Like I said in the last show, the elephant stands in the room. Now he starts to sit down and to trumpet. We experience more intensity. It's very clear. Not a long time ago, the elephants, Europe, Germany, they don't exist. There were some times we don't know, there was no NSA, no such agency, but now everyone knows it. I remember times where it started with the X-Files. We said there are secret CIA files and UFOs and extraterrestrials, what do I know? And today it's mainstream. You don't have to discuss about it anymore, but not a long time ago was very covered in secret. It's now, the elephant is in the room, sitting down. People get used to it, but in comparison to some years ago, they said elephants don't exist here. It's different. Yeah, right now I sorted the news and I put one news away which 1 year ago would have made it here, because it was about that they admit now that the Americans and the Germans, the news, they make it easy this way, to give Snowden no asylum, because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten information. And this is a kindergarten level. We don't know things. We know we are a colony. It becomes unoverseeable. And from this, things we can see now are much more intensive, much more obvious, and are standing in another phase of things happening. So, we have had some acts behind us in this theater play. Now it's reconstructed and the scenery built up, and we can see messages that show it. Let's see at the end of the show, are there recommendations to deal with the different qualities now, because people experience this in different ways. People maybe feel the magnetic field or have pain. So at the end of the show, maybe we can say something to that. Now let's go into the messages. Yeah, I have a message here about the solar eclipse, and I want to repeat the subject, because I have something to say about this blackout which has not happened. The message I have is, does the solar eclipse force the electricity net into its knees? From the Focus magazine, and we see the Focus magazine in its headlines, this low level way. It's sensationally made up. Focus magazine has another language and addresses another goal group. They only make this news for the remaining readers, and they are totally for them. Focus has not many more readers than we have watchers in German. Yeah, many of the media, meanwhile, are brought to their knees. So here it is, the solar eclipse will maybe destabilize power networks. And there are two critical moments. One is at the beginning of the solar eclipse, when at once the solar power panels, through the shadows, they don't put so much more energy into the system, and stress comes up. So I have to say something to this, because our understanding of the power grid can really be improved, and we can understand many combinations. So there was a show where they showed the curves, where they regulate it, and the sun decreases. So the solar panels, which are much more now than 99, there were not so many, it was not so decisive, but now the power line goes down. The computers would have equalized it out, and then it would have gone up again. Is this so, or is it just a fairy tale they tell us? No, it has some truth. We must know the power grid just have to provide that much power as is used. Always the same amount of electricity that is used. You cannot store anything in between. There's no chance that you can say, well, at the moment there's less needed, so we must store it, and later there's more needed. So always there has to be provided the same amount. And it's so sometimes companies lead electricity to the earth so that they get a lower rate, whatever. Yeah, you are some steps too far now. Today it's the situation that we don't have one part that's responsible for the one address that's responsible for the electricity net, so there are also distributors and a stock exchange where electricity prices are traded. So, back to technology. We need as much power produced as there's consumed. They can measure it with a frequency, and this frequency can maybe step a little bit outside. It can change or fall, like the blood pressure of a human. And we don't feel well if it changes too much. And the electricity net has to stay in a certain range of frequencies. And the problem is that the net is not directly just in time responding. So you cannot just switch off a power plant, because many power plants need hours or days to be stopped or started again. That's the problem with alternative energies. Biogas installations or wind builds or photo electricity power plants, they don't put energy in at the times they are needed. So sometimes they are not connected to the network at all. It brings our system into problems, because the weather cannot be pre-calculated in the way that we see, well, in 1 hour we have a strong wind, so we can drive our other power plants down. This doesn't work. They're working on this problem. They're trying to store electricity now somehow, but it's a complex subject, and for us of a big symbolism, because they can see how energy goes, and energy has to float. And energy that has to float, we see it in the monetary system, and we see it in the moment in a big problematic, because the money is not flowing anymore. Instead, it stops. It's many parts. They print money. They bring money into the system. But there's an old traders, bankers say, it says the horses have to drink. The market has to adapt this money. So you guide the horses to the water and they don't drink. So the money does not reach certain places. And energy has to float, and the artificial structures don't work in a way because they're extremely under stress. And there are complex systems of regulation as well as electricity as with money, so where milliseconds computers decide whether they buy or sell. Well, no human can say, well, I think if I buy something, but the computer does it through algorithms. No one can explain anymore if a computer decides I buy many stocks of this and how this had worked out, because we're dependent on things now that we don't understand anymore. What you say is right. On the one hand, it's traded between two computers. This happens in a complex system, in many parts. We remember a headline message here that some months ago there was a problem with such computer, and within seconds, at once, values of billions have been pulverized, and the system was reset again. So we realize this grotesque dependency, and I want to point to the solar eclipse in this manner. What they explain here as an unusual problem, well, through shadows, the solar power plants, they could decrease, so this happens every day. This happens every day. There are weather changes at once. There are changes that can be seen before. They know how much electricity is needed. They can calculate it, but they cannot calculate the weather. The sun or the wind only in little parts. This is the basic problem of the alternative electricity supply. No problem in the context with the solar eclipse. Yeah, but they addressed it, they made a little panic, the low press level of... Yeah, panic is a big subject. They explain it this way, and the big collapse didn't come. So here's another headline I don't read about the solar eclipse. They said they can watch it. I heard in France, school children were locked inside so that they're not in danger to watch the sun. Yeah, this would have been my message. Yeah, it's important to see, well, it's absurd. They have so much fear. They say, well, put on sun lotion, factor 150, don't go to the sun, that's deadly. How absurd. We need the sun, it nourishes us. There are people who are feeding on light, on prana. Maybe you can think this or that about that, but we need the light. And they make fear. Yeah, now we need the light, spring is approaching, we feel it, the light plays an important role, and we have an enormous manipulation concerning light, especially here in Germany. We are under ritual structures and influences that give us sadness and sad weather very consciously and fitting to the situation. Remember the football championship from the beginning. There was no day where there were clouds, and if you think back, you have to really think of a time where there had been a blue sky. Yeah, and the people said some years ago, chemtrails, it's absurd, that won't work. But everyone can see it now. It's blue sky, you see the planes and chessboard patterns flying around. And you can see it on plane finder, whatever, the normal planes. And you will notice that some planes don't appear there. Could be military planes, but that in every case very fast the blue sky turns into a kind of unnatural soup. Well, I photographed landscapes for many years, and on old photos I cannot see this form of clouds with structure that can be led back to those stripes. Only that it's not only explainable by increasing flight traffic. Yeah, like the frog being cooked in the warm water, we get used to it. We see many people growing up who don't have this memory anymore. So this becomes a mystery sometimes, like a legend that there had been a blue sky. And this happens so amazingly fast that you can only wonder. Finally, I brought something about the solar eclipse with the Federal Office of People Protection and Catastrophe Help. They say the solar eclipse could impact the power grid. BBK they recommend measures because of the partial solar eclipse. The moon will cover the sun to 80%. It's a rare phenomenon. Last time it happened in 2003. Next to this, we cannot forget that the solar eclipse is a big challenge to the management of the electricity networks. In this message, it's important we have not a closed power network that can work on its own. We are all connected to each other very strongly, and the electricity management has become very important. We see a big insecurity. On the other hand, this fragile system does not only concern a big surface, but there are different systems playing together which could lead to chaos or challenges. So this news, if you look at it, it's a little bit propaganda, because actually this photovoltaic network does not play such a big role, because it would be a too big risk. You would have to equalize it out in too many ways. That's not possible. A friend of mine, an engineer, says the electricity network is permanently under stress here. There may be other countries with much different infrastructure, but this central power supply is very fragile and very complicated. I've seen a video of Neckermann in the internet, Neckermann electricity generator, that seems to maybe about free energy. Like it's a little box you install in the house, and it produces decentral energy. You have to rent it, you cannot buy it, as I understood it, then you would have free energy. Is this, for me, is it believable that such things come? Is this a game changer, or is it something that has to come, so they do it by announcing it already now? Or is it something very absurd for you? So I have not heard about this, what you say. You can just Google Neckermann generator, energy tuner it is called. So there are many possibilities that are regarded now. There are many advances. Last time we talked about the car alternative named Tesla. But in this context, it's interesting to watch the comments in this context that connect this to their own world. So, if we speak something about the solar eclipse here, it's not my personal concern. So in indirect ways, yes. So I like the subject to watch energies, but when we talked about the car subject, then it was just to show up a big change, not to say this is the big solution, we've got an electric car. No, not at all. Only what you say. Maybe to extend the subject to one point. This car drives maybe 450, 500 kilometers far. The big weak point is the accu, the battery. It has only a little capacity, and this determines the limit. And now Apple comes out with a new Apple Watch. You heard about it? It has a running time of 18 hours. And in my view, this watch cannot be sold because I'm not independent with this clock for one day. So if it would run 14 or 30 days, then it's something totally different. If we compare this to the car, and we have a car that runs 20,000 kilometers with one battery load, then everyone must be conscious that a petrol motor has no chance anymore. They don't have to speak about the subject anymore, that we can experience in one simple part limited. It can lead at once to such a big change that a century-old lobby structure of strong manner where wars have been led about oil. It's not about the car, or I like that car. So it's about to recognize we experience a fundamental change in front of our eyes that we can only recognize if we think one step further. And this is getting conscious to us with such examples. I don't want to advertise the Neckermann energy generator, but to show this is a game changer of things getting into motion. Some point things appear on stage which had been hidden away before. And there's one alternative to this Tesla system in the car that has the great name Karma. It's a diesel-electric car. So in front there's a petrol engine running that loads the battery, and the car needs 2.6 liters at 100 kilometers only, half of the other cars. And things get into motion here. This car has a great name, Karma. It's a vegan, they also produce it in a vegan way, not only without leather but without any animal products, and the wood is from a forest where it had been found and collected. So we see, even if some people might declare it as a marketing strategy, it's a change of consciousness. It's not about what the person thinks who invented it. It's not about the plans. It's what appears on stage now, and other things appear now on stage. People look in the supermarket, what's inside there? Are there some preservatives? People ask, and they say we have to serve those people because it's the market. So we see a big change that's an expression of a risen consciousness, unoverseeable. This is another message. In Frankfurt, sinks in fire and tear gas. Maybe unprepared. The camera. Looks like a little apocalyptic picture, like an old drawing. Now, imagine the solar eclipse in addition to that. So I've gone to school in Wiesbaden. Frankfurt was in front of my door. And if you see such a picture, it has another quality, an intense quality, an intense dramatic. Now the reports were that they reported over violence and so on, but many many demonstrated in peaceful ways. So the news is concentrating on violence and smoke and fire. But critics say the violence, or violence that banks do to us, that they finance wars, bring people into emergency, million people worldwide, it's different than if a police car is burning. I don't want to say this is good. It doesn't bring use to anyone. Only hooligans using this for themselves. But no matter, the violence that the banks do is something that's not seen. And here's the counter violence of the demonstrants. Yeah, people are reporting on that. They are just playing this game also. So from my sources I've got the information that many of the violent people came from neighboring foreign countries, not single ones, but professional groups. They are showing some kind of protest that's not wanted and that people fear in society. And they can show a picture here how it could look if people don't accept things. And this wouldn't nobody wants, so things would be alright as they are. So it is at the same time a little threat into a direction they see here, and they show this play with all protagonists they need, and maybe also paid provokers that start violence, because on the other side we see that the system has an interest that people are attacking each other, no matter if Pegida, anti-Pegida movements are directed against each other, also by the media. And that there's an interest that they say people are violent anyway, they are not peaceful as they say. That is wanted, this picture. Just, look, those people are leading wars. Some background powers want that the people attack each other, so that they have confirmation. If we don't control it, then people kill each other. But they don't do. I think people are not so violent. They don't attack each other. And many things that don't work. Well, I wanted to say this in a complicated sentence. There are groups are being brought there that show a picture that brings fear to the normal citizen, so he won't go demonstrating if there are flying stones and violent people. He doesn't want to have to do anything with them. Clearly, what you say, it's not old, not new, but it's very old. And this kind of strategy can be proved also back decades ago in the Weimar Republic. There were the fighting parts of the parties, and there were many hundreds of dead people then. And what we see now is an expression of a change, and since that, an expression of the time that even if it's orchestrated, if it's just a show, they say he is friction. Even an artificially produced play is still an expression of a certain energy, and this is what we see now. There are enormously many things getting into motion now, and we see that the power of the banks is questioned. This happens. Well, 10, 20 years ago, nobody would have understood how money is produced. They would say, well, money, banks lend us money, and it's all right. It empowers the economy. economy, but now they ask from which right they produce debts and money from nothing. And the word money, Geld, is from the word gilt, not from gold. And it's an old word that means debt, guilt. And in truth, we've got debt bills. And what we experience here is an inflationary development. And this message fits there. Also from the newspaper world, magician Draghi fears the 85% prognosis. He favors a weak euro, but the currency loses its value. It follows a historically pessimistic goal of course of the euro. So we see the development of the euro, and this is something that's very important. You see, at the 12th April, I've got an event near Stuttgart about euro crisis, financial crisis, what can you do, gold, silver. Are those possibilities, not only because the subject gets important now, but it has a long development history. And I see a chart here how the value of the euro has developed against the dollar. We see it's a development that's long ago, since 1 year ago. It starts in March last year and ends here. If you see the last part, we started at 138. We're now at under 110. And the tendency is deeper. I think we were at 106 this morning. We see a development here that's only then we don't recognize. If we just look into Europe and not see the big they sell this weakness of the euro to something positive. Yeah. It's a very symbolic subject. But I wanted to point to the euro being compared to other currencies. So the euro has lost against the dollar at the 11th of March, lost 29.9%. So we are over 30% now in comparison to the dollar. And in comparison to the Hong Kong dollar, the Chinese renminbi, because those are connected, of course, and 25% against Indian rupee. So the euro loses 25% against the Indian rupee, against the South Korean won, against the Peruvian Sol loses, the euro loses 20%, and we think this would be good for us and would not hit us. So we have to get conscious. Some days ago I spoke to a Thailandic woman. She said her husband would have hoped that they could buy a little house in Thailand from his pension, from her husband's pension, but now they get very few baht for euro. So some month ago they got 50 baht for 1 euro, now 32. So we see a development that everyone can see except us, because we see it from our own perspective. From our European view we cannot perceive it. So this weakness of the euro is sold to us as a pseudo-strength. That's effrontery for us. So we got a devaluation where we cannot defend against. This concerns the money on your account as well as the money under your mattress. Now to say, well, the US dollar, it does not mean that it's strong. So they also prepare that the US dollar would just not show the value, and the IMF, you've got this message, the IMF, is something that the mass media ignore, although it's dramatic. The IMF shows a time change. It reacts to a chain of catastrophe, political changes in the USA, and takes steps for preparing the end of dollar hegemony. The World Bank buys now puts the Chinese yuan into its portfolio, something that had a totally different category before, so the IMF has to include it, and they pretend it would be everyday procedure, but it isn't. Shows they expect big changes. Yeah, what you just said, it concerns us in obvious measures. We see the resources. We pay the resources in dollars. So the weak euro leads to things we buy into dollar getting more expensive. So there the dollar is still world currency. And that this time comes to an end, it's unoverseeable. There are Russia and China agreeing on many things and many developments. But on this message you said of the IMF, we should not forget that the IMF represents USA, because here the US might wish this collapse in the right time, because it cannot be avoided. And we experience this maybe as a signal for that this point in time is not so far anymore. So at the moment we, full of pride, deliver German products and values for always less money and feel like an export world champion. But we don't get this money at all. It's just a claim. And this claim will not come true in many parts. So the biggest part of the German gold from this former export time, at the boom times, came there. So we've got many old obligations. It's not to be perceived separated from that happens now. So 3 years ago, Christine Lagarde, IMF boss in Shanghai, so Germany and France wanted to participate into the Chinese investment bank. So now there are developments that Western countries are taking part in Asian monetary organizations. So this is very short a new development, and the media ignore it. Yes, but this also stands on the plan. They want to sacrifice the old players. Yeah, this happens partially with a golden parachute and partially at the lamp. Yeah, they always search someone guilty, and they will not only find them, but they have found them, and then those preparations are being made. I have here brought a message from NTV from the 18th of March. 10 Hagen's clues. Who fears the weak euro? The journalist explains why it falls, and he explains it falls because the European Central Bank pumps very much money into the market and follows the goal of weakening the euro so that the Europeans sell their products better internationally. So he explains this problem as a strategy. So while nowadays weak currencies count as good currencies, but we are not surprised, because in this time we see it in many parts that the values are put on their head. And of course such a weak value that we have is the beginning of big problems approaching us. Why does the money of the ECB brings the euro to fall, where there are very low interest rates, and the money goes there where it brings most interest rates, the highest interest rates. And here's the important clue. But because of this, money floated into USA, because there the treasuries offer interest rates here. But here in Germany, they have a negative interest rates if they buy state papers. So here, like in electricity management, as in power management, money is directed to where it should go, in big streams. So this is strategy, but not strategy in the like the Europeans wanted, but how those people wanted to have actually to say something. So here I said consumers don't have to fear a further devaluation. And he says it's only problems if you're outside of Europe. If the euro should stay low, people would pay more for things outside of the European Union, maybe like southern fruits or electronics. So it's devastating in which kind things, the devaluation that happens here already, how they sell it to us as a totally unimportant thing. And in reality, we will see what will approach us. Yeah, we don't realize it if we stay in the Eurozone, as well as we have not realized things were getting more expensive as the euro was introduced, because they did not realize it, because they did not want to realize it. Well, many people realize it, as me, and we still speak of D-Mark prices in many parts to confront this. So in this way, the weak euro makes life more expensive. The Welt newspaper writes it. So it's a little bit different message. They write the euro loses value. The euro loses value, they say, and this is right. Inflation doesn't mean higher prices, but the devaluation of currency. And this is what happens now, and we see it in some parts. So inflation gets real. So we see it in the stock markets. Enormously much money is flowing in. Or in housing prices, there are fantasy prices demanded and partially even paid. An enormous absurd scenario. And from this, what we can watch here, it's much bigger than it seems in the first view. So I just brought it here to show things are being addressed, but in much more relativized. And Michael, as they say, people getting calmed down. You have something about Greece? Yes, about Greece. I maybe mean the same. So I have here from the daily newspaper in Switzerland interesting news in the system. The system which wants to protect their structures. They speak about capital controls, even inside of the Eurozone. Up until a short time, they said the euro is great to travel freely without changing currency, and they sacrifice this now. But they, in Swiss Tagesanzeiger magazine, they have different news. When people banks suspect their customers, they don't hand out much cash money, because those customers could wash this money or not pay taxes. So 2 Italian bank customers cancelled their bank accounts with 75,000 francs, and the Tessin bank declined because they said they would not pay taxes, and the Italians went to court. But now the interesting explanation, although the court judged that the bank has to pay, why it can still become possible that banks don't pay is the following. It's about the rights of the people behind the counter. The most creative idea is that people on the counter could, from personal reasons, decline a payment. Because if they would pay and the customer would not pay taxes, then they could be held accountable for helping. So we here recognize the communist civilization of the world. Everyone is a single entrepreneur, as a single fighter in a system without own rights. You don't have rights by doing your job, but in last consequence, you're always without rights. And your rights that are protected to the outside, they are at least in reality the clue that they are totally liable. So the rights they sell you are a clue to that you're liable to everything, and the bank is not responsible. So yeah, it's interesting because we can tell someone in a government agency to be liable personally. So we could say to him on the other side, yeah, that's right. Here we see it from the other side in a very interesting way. So they sell us something that could be regarded differently. And here's the clear clue. Here, you working at the counter, you are always totally privately liable for towards a big brother whose interests you have to keep. This may be the financial agency or here in Italy. So this means the worker at the bank is liable towards an institution, as you would have seen it, or to a state that in reality here acts as a company, and she has to keep their interests. So what we've experienced often, you've got money on the bank, the bank says you don't get it. How absurd this is, and this is a reference to your seminar, who has money on the banks should not really expect to access it every time if the bank doesn't want it. Very clear. So the actual banking rules in Germany say it's not your money anymore. You give the bank the money. It's the money of the bank. You have a claim to this money, but it's not your money anymore. And this appears incredible to many, but you can easily read it, and it has been subject here in maybe 2010, 2011, when those courts judged in this way. Now it's time to wake up, to move your back, and not to be drawn into subjects, but on the other hand, recognize reality and prepare. So there's a nice history of the man who was surprised by a rainstorm, and the rainstorm reminds him of flooding, whatever, and he has to flee to the roof, but he believes in God, he's a faithful man, and he doesn't lose the trust when he's on the roof. And then there's a neighbor with a bathtub, and he says, well, neighbor, I'll help you. And he says, no, God will save me. And then the neighbor goes away with his bathtub boat, and then people come with a boat, and he declines, and suddenly he drowns. goes to heaven and complains and says, "Why have you let me drown? I so much trusted you." And he said, "I sent you a boat twice." And this is we are supplied by such signals. If we ignore them, it has nothing to do with being a good idea not to cope with such subjects. But look, if it's knocking, just open. So for me, it's a clue to not to have so much money at the bank. I would do it bit by bit over a part, then it's not. Oh, this is not a good idea. No. Interesting. They realize it even more. This internal info, I tell you, there are certain structures where people are being watched if they withdraw money from the bank. Certain algorithms are alarming. With bigger or smaller amounts in short time periodically withdrawn, then you may be asked what you're doing with the money. So we realize in this part how they are preparing for such movements, and my insider information say that bigger sums are taken off the banks from the accounts. Not only in Greece, there yes, but yeah, this won't be accepted. Maybe. Next news. Soon they won't need cash anymore. So it won't take long and the smartphone will replace the wallet. Mobile payment will be Apple starts through with the idea. Well, clean statement, but it has a bold statement, but it's planned. This is an attempt. We've seen it in Sweden. There are banks that don't have no cash reserves anymore. You can just move money electronically. Of course, you are not only fully controllable, then, but all your movements are not only recorded, but become an instrument that could be used against you, because by the push of a button, they could cut you off. So as a system critic, you got bad cards. At this moment, you cannot pay your bills anymore, your credit card doesn't go anymore. And this is an ideal imagination, maybe a big dream of those who want to shut this, close the system down, and don't realize how obvious the crash is knocking. Is there a clue to how to withdraw money? We'll do the seminar at April the 12th, but for me there's a point: diversify. Not only one bank where I have the money, but I have on many parts money or gold or whatever. There bought something, here values, so in a way that I'm not cannot be switched off by setting everything on one card, but by having many small accounts or things. So it's a complex subject. They can be regarded differently dependent on the situations, because many small tricks still work well, but are endangered, because I don't want to keep it to myself, but it is always a clue, a point to so this I cannot give clues here, but what you say is an approach to gain understanding, for that you could be cut off every time from what you perceive as property, but you don't own really, and you have to understand that. And in many parts, the real estates we're not only visible, we are totally under control, and we have to create values that are not totally under control. It's a basic task. So everyone can remember, what can you do? It's very precious, because even those failed attempts, if you start to look, many things get obvious. Just make yourself, it's exciting to even make you conscious how much you are dependent. And devices, you cannot just change currencies. If you want to change your pound or dollar or Swiss francs, then it's only via the accounts, not in cash anymore. They want to make surveillance normal. Also in this, even if you change a few dollars, you have to sign it, and they register it somewhere. So they close doors, and with a big velocity. And why? Panic everywhere in those heads, but we should not have panic. Yeah, they try to bring it under control, but I think and hope they won't do it. So you see what they recommend, what the nursepaper recommends. So people, you can earn money with a weak euro. So no one has to just buy stocks of big exporting companies. That's an important. We see the red line goes down. That's the euro, and what we see behind, in the background, there's this stock values, the German stock index. It has achieved great heights. Why? Because the money is flowing there. But the side effect of this, you have to mention, for American investors, the DAX, the German index, is really cheap, because they buy them 30% cheaper than 1 year ago. So we have got, in the biggest companies, always less German investors, always more international investors, that because of the down-pressed euro, they can buy cheap. We see we don't have to be very attentive. We see what else is happening. We experience it. The exporting champions who are proud of it are being taking things away. Another message that, a little bit technical, we just talked about the Baltic Dry Index. Remember? This is a value, the ships. Yeah, it notes the prices that have to be paid for bulk, for ores, this industrial products where they produce things out of it, raw materials. And the Baltic Dry Index broke really low to the deepest value of all times. It had never been so low since its introduction. There's a message in the Welt newspaper, and it is a great example of how we're getting stupidified, because what here stands is not true. The fear, the rash of the Baltic Dry Index, financial crisis, new economy. The Baltic Dry Index has predicted many stock crashes, and they point to this development in the Baltic Dry Index, but it does not rash, it falls. A rash is a peak, it's something completely different. An eruption and the sun is a rash. But we witness a permanently falling Baltic Dry Index that has nothing to do with the rash. It shows that the world economy is in the backward gear. And we can, even if we feel totally intellectual, we can read such a news, and proud and stupid read the next subject, but it's devastating. It's an example how a message that it's true background can be totally we have a falling Baltic Dry Index since 2009 with small movements. Yes, the red curve is falling. It starts 1985. Yes, 2000. Massively up, down. But it's no peak that happens in 1 hour in other parts, but a tendency.
Der DAX hingegen, der geht hoch.
And the DAX stock exchange index goes up. Has nothing to do with real value. So much house you get for your rent. They try to bring people into values like the stocks and the real estate that make you dependent. Because if you've got your apartment where you pay much for, you cannot just cancel, but you are tied to that. And being tied is what the system people like. You have to pay for it. And now we have laid a view on the financial system, especially on the euro. I want to conclude it with a view to the world system. So this message, this Europe is a misconstruction. Many people said it years ago, but in spite of their success, this EU is no stable system. They try to repair it with money, but it doesn't work anymore in an old and weak Europe. So this is no theory, this is the just reason for the next measures. We have a news here where one or the other one would nod and say, it's a misconstruction, I always knew it, but overreads, that's what you are being sold. It's not the EU, the misconstruction, but the society, the misdevelopment of societies. So here they want to repair the broken system in many ways, too little integration. Europe has stopped in its core, has cultivated the old mistakes. We need a new Europe, with new people, and the governments make them their people as they want it and collect them in their whole world. And those people who had originally rights on their state lose their rights. And this is being sold to us. I brought this news so that we are not getting too much euphoric if a headline seems that someone would have been woken up and criticizing things. You said obviously people who originally live here are being put into worse rights than the system. Yeah, they have to, because they got rights that would be a problem to the system. So they have to be deprived of their rights, so that everyone has equally low rights. So they have to be cut off their rights. Like the Native Americans, they still have in the USA and the reservation certain rights. No sheriff can come in, they can gamble. Why? Because they were the owners of the land. And what to the outside is sold as justice is just ridiculing. What remains of the rights is not much, but it shows that they have original rights, and also we have it, and no administrationary system can take it away, and they want to take this away. And here the EU is like Uber state. It's for all member states They want to abolish their old rights or give them at least the seal they are obsolete, and want to give us new rights, and they are equally for everyone, but in reality we lose all rights. So there's an example of a refugee family. It's not against foreigners here. I don't have anything against that. We accept foreigners and integrate them. But here one family costs 50,000 euros a month, or Swiss francs in Switzerland, because social workers the children going to the home, and they got 4-room apartment for 4,000 francs a month, and social aid and so on. 9,000 francs for a place in the home. So the village is spending more money for this family than gaining money. It's on the focus. It's not against foreigners here, but they have unequal measures, and they can't even control it, and they have to. The village has to do it this way. What you say with a point, for me it's grotesque. Everyone can see it. It's not by accident. Since years, they produce those things to let people go against each other, and they prepare it. Those who to the outside seem to be social and have good intentions and want to integrate people, but in reality they bring forward the opposite with such measures. It's no surprise, but those news increase, and like we had with Charlie Hebdo, they said at first it has nothing to do with Muslims, and now they say those were Islamic attacks. So they want to make us used to such propaganda. And this happens on all levels, like Pegida against Islamization, and this is also evil. So this is you can lose no matter what you say. It's a fact. And this is a big challenge for me, that those all subjects are nothing more than symbols. They have, on the level on which we discuss them, they have only this symbolistic meaning, because everything goes its way, and everything is just a picture of the moment, and the quality of consciousness of the moment, and abstruse scenery which gets obvious, and they use it. But it helps the one or the other one to see through and get a confirmation that he's not wrong with his critical view, but we are experiencing a farce here, which has to be called such. The monetary system has we've talked much about it, and here's another news with the session of the U.S. bank, the Fed, Federal Reserve Bank. They would raise the interest rate or not. So this is such important subject, so I had to bring it. So at first it does not come, at least not now. But this, they fear it. If the interest rates would rise, the whole system would massively get under stress. They could say the Fed, with a determined they would saw the branch off on which they sit, because the system would not equal out the high stress. So we got zero interest or negative interest. Why? Because the system is like a Moloch under control, out of control, absorbs that much energy that cannot be controlled. So an old vampire needs more little girls to suck out. more than there's available. And the only way to control it is through low interest rates. But now, someone, at least, the possibility of raising interest rates can be brought into the system so that it would not collapse from another reason. Because if the interest rates wouldn't have to be raised, there would come another problem like the inflation. The US Federal Reserve doesn't change the interest rate. So the Fed concluded that the interest would stay between 0 and 0.25, so de facto at 0. Still, preparing the interest change. So they don't change it, but they're preparing. Well, how will they do it? Carefully, they preparing an approaching change. So they had a signal word that they had still had been patient, signalized patience. So they make it dependent of the recovery of the unemployment figures, but they won't recover. And now the word patient goes away, and the idiots and experts and head onanists can wonder what this might mean. What does this mean, that this word had been led away? And from this, out of this, it's so unexplainable that you have to put it out. It's no new development. I remember Bloomberg TV when they discussed every word then of Ben Bernanke or Alan Greenspan. If he spoke this or that way, what does that mean? And then a prognosis made for the future. So what we can see now is they say, well, yes, soon there will be a change of interest rates, but now we have to regard it in a way as if it would be there already. So words are lacking if you watch that. But I want to do it because to make the normal citizen clear what they sell you as a complicated and very difficult quality only for specialists is in reality an idiotic Casper theater. And this theater still brings people into action only by words that mean nothing. What can we add to that? Let's look to Greece shortly. I pointed to this. So please start. Maybe you meant this message here. I just look, I've got two messages. One, Athens threatens in the Euro poker with the will of the people. Oh, it's so strange. They threaten with the will of the people. So actually, politicians, maybe they would represent the will of the people, but Athens threatens in the Euro poker with the will of the people. You can't extend it. Where was this? It's from the Welt newspaper. The trust of the Greece consumers is better than the business climate. Athens will be back on the wall, and the people in the referendum should vote about the. It has failed once. What about the economic savings course? So more is interesting.
Ich bin zwar kein Segler, aber ich weiß, was eine Wolte ist. Eine Kursänderung.
A course change, a vote.
Sehen können bei dieser Meldung ist, dass der Willen des Volkes eine Kursänderung wäre.
So the will of the people would be a course change. But they don't pursue the will of the people. And they threaten with a course change. So expressionally say, what we do has never been the will of the people, but we could, remember, would then do a course change. It's still harder. It's very absurd. Then there's the demand of the Greece towards Germany. 476 billion bond doesn't exist because the check of the file shows something completely different. The decisive calculation of the file, of the old file, or whatever, is
Ich will das gar nicht weiter ausführen. Ich zeige es nochmal, nur dass es eben das, was man uns dann zeigt, dass
they show such that the Greek people would have such claim, and this would be today much more worth, and it's a different thing than they present it to us, as so often.
Okay?
Okay?
Das hast du aus Griechenland gehört.
So it's not a debt, it's just something else in reality. So I brought something from Greece. I can almost put it away. Here's the headline at NTV: We Greece remember exactly. We Greek people. So if there would be this domino effect in Greece, it would be really uncomfortable for everyone. And this is, they value it as bribery. But this is much better news. We as economists, Sinn says, we have to kneel down for the Greek people, we Germans. So, we have another expert who says what we have to do. A top economist. It's not only an economist, but a top economist. Top, he should sit at the top of the pyramid to outside, but it has nothing to do with capabilities, but this bowing down has to do something with we have to see the symbolism. So in Christian mythology, it's bowing down before God is important, and it means we have to make ourselves defenseless. Yeah, this is what we Germans have to do, nothing else. Yeah, and they recognize it every more. And the popular opinion makers in the media are always stronger, recognized in their absurdity. Even Mr. Jauch, J-A-U-C-H, TV moderator. My printer didn't want to print it, but maybe you have it. No, I don't have it. But a Swiss magazine demands that the TV station would throw Mr. Jauch out because what he says that he would have shown the sticky finger to the Greece finance minister, but if you hear the sentence, it says something completely different than what Jauch said. There's the discussion, has this finger been copied in, or there was a fake of a fake, so you don't really know the original picture anymore, but the sentence that he said is something else than he's said. Jauch. The sticky finger says it's interesting in which ways we deal with certain energetic subjects. But what's to me, I see those protagonists of stupidifying are seeing a little bit more critically, even if only from a view, but what we see at Mr. Jauch is nothing new, and we see it in all systems that
Zum Thema habe ich noch was mitgebracht. Das ist ganz spannend aus der Welt im Zusammenhang
another subject,
mit Forderungen an Deutschland.
the Welt magazine, those demands from Germany. So a Minister of Justice wants to
Justizminister Nikos mit einem schwierigen griechischen Namen ist auch
wants to
bereit, deutsches
seize German property in Greece.
Also hier habe ich diese Meldung auch deswegen mitgebracht.
So I brought this news to just show how little you are owner of something. This is valued especially if you have property in foreign countries, because you have basically different rights. And you can see the pseudo-stability of real estate is something that will fly into our face very, very obviously, very, very soon. This is news. Greece was always bankrupt. Conrad. It has been 170 years ago this way, and the reasons have not changed, like a historical study shows. So you have to understand this news. You almost don't believe it if you see it. Greece has always been bankrupt, and they deserved it. Who remembers the understatement of Mr. Kissinger? He said they would want to destroy Greece completely. Greece has an old history, and this old history is people who have, they still remember Greece. Rome plays a big role in some turned people who think we have the power. Greece, many things will happen, many things stand in front of our door. Maybe before our next show. I brought something that shows what you said at the beginning when you asked, have really things more happened? Do really more things happen? Some people say, well, it's the 71st show today. In its quality, it's like the 20th or the 40th show. Yeah, that's right, but it's about basic energies. But the expression is much more obvious and has increased. Highest court ignored. CDU and SPD party firm state national control about the national television station. So the politics ignored the judges and to keep the television under control. So this is a big hit against the freedom of press and contradicts the demanded so there's a television council and political parties represented, and they speak about what's being broadcasted and what not. And there was a judgment, and they don't keep to that. While national we haven't got anyway, we've got parties in the governing parties. So this illusory children's world is calming pills. They cannot, if it would endanger the system, they cannot. So people think, well, the judges said, the so-called constitutional court said they judged for the people, but it can be totally ignored by parties that can have no tasks. So a party is like an association without rights and cannot be liable. Who looks at those constructions can only see shake his head, but it's lived practice. And I brought this to make people awake, to think into the structures. The illusion is always sacrificed if there's no energy left anymore, if it's about the existential things. So this is a great message, and so they manipulate, and this message shows, be careful, the political parties determine what news are shown, and this news is a result. Putin annexed the Crimea, so we said something about annexion. It's an important word, because then they can attack militarily. But we experience it different. Island has always been part of Russia. There were always Russian soldiers, so they did not march in, and they decided democratically. So it has not been an election, but focus rights. So it's this way, Joe. Those people who start to dealing with German history, they are also frustrated. They find out certain things and say, look, I found that out and I demand things, but they interpret this as they want it. And the truth does not play a role here, so it's the enemy that has to be brought under control. The enemy is truth. Truth is the only thing that would bring such structures ad absurdum. So the lie needs this great support. So the evil thing here is, so the documentation shows this is the way Putin ordered to annex the Crimea. And this is a typical Hollywood manner, like Pearl Harbor presented totally out of historical context. So this gets not only in the heads of the visitors, but also should come into the morphogenetic field. This background, pseudo-realities are being created. I've seen it, like in 9/11. I've seen it, and I just met someone who saw the airplane, and then out there comes the truth that is not one, and they try to do it, and we experience this strong increase of ritual actions where they want to firm things. Maybe at the end of the show more. So this is the way Putin ordered the annexion of the Crimea. In the picture, this is the way Putin ordered. They showed in the way he ordered. But if he would have done something at all, they don't question it. And this is the headlines from another magazine. The development in Ukraine, Moscow. First US soldiers in West Ukraine. So we got many messages, we cannot show all. How many weapons and heavy US weapons are sent to the front. Soldiers are there, first US soldiers in West Ukraine. This points to that they plan something there. We see, and can imagine, if you would imagine Russians would send soldiers to Mexico, Mexican border to California, we would not question what would happen. But here they provoke in an evil way, in a self-explaining way, and every watcher should have attention. Just look many media sources to see a round picture of everything. So the great thing is many young people now don't watch the news on television like our fathers, but are informing alternatively in the internet and have another world picture this way, picture of the world. And this will have effects, and I think we see the effects now. And we see the internet was originally a military project, but it goes out of control somehow. And what we see now is that just those developments not really can be controlled in the way it's intended. It always has to be equaled out newly. As we see it in our lives, we've got a plan. This plan seems to work well a little bit, but then I have to draw plan B, plan C from the drawer. And this is what we experience. Plans don't work out that had been made 50 or 100 years, or worked 50 or 100 years ago. Many things are in the plan, but in the details we realize that we have has become an enormous burden into the system, like a Chinese artist who balances those plates on the sticks, and he says, well, he does it with 50, he can do it with 100. But we experience this can be only equaled out partially, and many broken plates are on the floor, and each day more plates come, because if you would not bring new plates, the system would collapse just because of this. You always need new levels and new side places that have to be supplied. The camera doesn't show the broken places, but the laughing Chinese man. I have nothing against Chinese men. Yeah, you should say it. You should not say it, not to confirm those people who reflexartically are howling. But we get this reaction, but we get them anyway. So, his summary: USA founded 239 years ago, from those 222 years in the war. 93%. Since the founding of the USA, for 239 years, there's no decade without a war with another country. In total, 222 years, or 93% of the whole time, the United States have been in war state. Since the founding in 1776, 239 years have passed, and those years in the war, 222 years in the war, and we're still in war. Actually, the USA is right now in 14 countries in war: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Cuba, Niger, Chad, Uganda, Egypt, Jordan, Kosovo, Central African Republic, and Tunisia. None of these countries has attacked the USA. And we think it's just normal. I want to the book Hallelujah, the history of the USA. And they say evil Putin is attacking other countries. You don't have to like Putin, but we see here in Germany we should not keep out of this, but there are drones steered from Germany, directed in Leipzig airport. Many soldiers are being transferred. We are the most important logistic place outside of the USA for US military actions, and we experience with the so-called government, with the BRD Federal Republic system, willingly system that serves this interest without doubting. But how obvious is this is not conscious to many people, and so those 14 countries were drawn into the war without a declaration of war. This has to do with we're still in war, at war. No real peace treaty. And with Japan is still under occupation status, and what we experience here, or the situation of Korea, is still a relic from those times, and these structures are being kept up because they serve. Beautiful or not beautiful. So here's some messages from the world, and they are great. Interesting. I sorted them a little bit. Let's look. Sabotage suspect. The new secret agency German central building had been flooded. So it was been sabotaged in Berlin. Someone screwed water taps off, and 10,000 liters were flooded, so this is an additional problem. They won't manage to finish this building anyway, and someone was not pleased, and it's a symbol of the resistance we can see. So they say only with one of 118 security cards you would get into this building. So they could collect them, but even in such a high security area with very restricted access possibilities, things are possible. And it shows maybe people that work there, that they don't like what happens there. So it's very unthinkable that not every movement is logged, so everyone knows whose card this is. A mouse click. but maybe the security system is not so good. And on those parts there are many speculations possible, but it's important in this part it's not guarded well. The billions expensive new building had been flooded. So there's always see a polar movement. So just see the energy of the building. It's neither beautiful nor rising, nor it cannot be. Because Buddha showed, make it obvious, what's that for a world that those people construct. I don't want to live there or work there or visiting that. It's interesting. People who work there, under which conditions they design their own life, sitting in such a room with a small plant, maybe a cactus, and spend a big part of their life and make other people's lives to hell. Yeah, they're still confined themselves. Yeah, it depends. So the people who are wards in the prison are still living in prison. You have to see. And even if they say to him, you're the shepherd dog, it calms them down. A message that provokes me to address it is the list of the richest people in the world. And one we find here who is not so good. So the European aristocrats, they have saved things. The king the queen has to save. The European monarchs turn every coin around twice. British royals are lacking money to maintain palaces, and Spanish king is diminishing his own salary. I don't want to step into that. I just want to say every third person in the world is property of the Queen. The Queen possesses a sixth of the Earth's surface. Australia, Canada. What we are being presented here is a message for those people who are a little bit retarded, these sitting in their room. The poor lady, she turns around every coin. There I am with my social aid money. I'm well off because I can go 1 month into the cinema and get a pizza at Lidl. What we see here is a stupidification on the lowest level, and we don't want to address those rituals and advent into the light a little bit, even if not in their whole own absurdity. Yeah, only to a little part. Look here from the Watts paper. Swedish people are letting them implant microchips. Small as a rice grain are the chips that Swedish workers are implanting to open automatic doors without paying cash. Yeah, many people were unhappy. It has not been fair. This was demonstrated. Yeah, this exists already. In America, this existed some months ago. Teenagers had given a voucher for shopping of $50 if they would have implanted such a chip, and they did it at place, and they could say proudly, "Hey, I'm a cyborg." But the whole to introduce this totally, it would fail because of resistance. Yeah, it's interesting that the Swedish do it first, but it seems astonishing for someone who watched it from the outside. There are explanations for this, but we are seeing we are kicked in the bottom, and we are putting our bottom towards those who are kicking, and we have to realize when we speak about the symbolism, this way of influencing and of control is something that happens with our consent in more parts than it's conscious to us. and without us realizing sometimes even. So first I have to notice that I'm treated in this way in this world, how they do it here. If I would perceive myself as a free human being and I don't realize that they catch me in such structures, then they cannot do such. But we realize it with vaccinations. Even people, if they're skeptical, they let themselves give vaccinations. I don't want to talk much more about this, but this reports in the media, they pretend there's this boy died of measles, he was not vaccinated. Of course he was vaccinated. There's the mumps, measles, triple vaccination, and he was vaccinated against the other two, so he was also vaccinated against measles, and they sell it as if vaccinations would be necessary. Yeah, there was big vaccination action, and you see big vaccination actions in the handbook of Wilson, and the native people were vaccinated, but certain people who belong to a cult did not want to get vaccinated. They were not forced, but they did not get ill. They have not died. And this is the documentation. There's a real big row of such subjects. So the subject is old and a very big financial subject, even from the beginning on. I think Robert Koch and the inventors, they faked Pasteur to make business out of that. Yeah, and Pasteur admitted this even. From the Berlin Courier. Founder as a child molester arrested. Michael Gender abused a child, or 4 children at least. He founded a charity organization for children. It's Nest Warmth, it is called, and it's such ridiculing of the structures we can see. It's the kindergartens of the churches, partially where they beat the children to believe something, or if there's a structures they care about old people and they let starve old people. Here in Germany, 10,000 starve. 10,000 don't get enough water in the structures for elderly people. This is so incredible and so unbelievable. It stands as one symbol, but this absurdity with the children's charity Nest Warmth under one pedophile is what we can see. It's like an SOS children's village of Worpswede. There had been one case of abuse, and I know it from a woman whose children are brought against her will, and she says that they also are abused, and she just goes to the police and media, but no one's interested in this. I say it carefully, but this is from this town here, and it's called Children's Village, but it's no singular case. And he said he filmed himself while doing this, but there are many worse things and more things, but this gets onto the light. In England we saw and pointed to, if you follow this, there comes permanently new things, thousands of cases. And in England, a McDonald's restaurant in cellar, babies would have been prepared to be eaten. You cannot imagine, but this ritual things, I said, this basis, there's a big barrel of, has to go to public. What you say there should be separated from a sexual direction, or it's not a singular phenomenon, but they do it with an evil intention and with a clear goal, and this goes into the ritual direction. It has something to do with destroying of healed aspects of life, of sane aspects of life, and it's satanic structures, and is not old but has such little regard, because those structures seem to be something we have left behind. But those who practice it, for those it's very present, and it's one of the easy methods to say, well, this doesn't exist anymore, and they don't look there anymore, and you can almost in front of all eyes do those things. Also with the European Central Bank in Frankfurt, that have happened many things in a ritual way. So many things happen in front of our eyes and people don't see it. So people... what do you mean by this? You pointed to something. Yeah, it's very complex, but I have some examples. Partially there's symbols we can see. Here I can make clear there's symbols and signs. Signs are human-made and are a sign that where I put a certain quality on. And I've been written to, what has this to do with the owls? I would have to answer, so owls can also be a sign and stand for a symbol energy, and those signs are the one thing. There, where we see the pentagram also with the European Central Bank. On the other hand, there are energetical things that are don't have to be visible, but are working. So the date of the opening of the European Central Bank was the 18th. So there are many things to say about the European Central Bank. Maybe do it another time. But it's no good idea to jump too short, because you need much background. Otherwise, it would sound like absurd theories you need understanding. Yeah, we don't manage to do everything in time here, but I think the viewer can make his own thoughts with those little clues. Yeah, there are some little clues maybe in other parts in our shows that point somewhere. Yeah, politicians have worldwide the worst reputation from all jobs. German economy news, from all workers groups, politicians have the least trust. Only 15% trust them. Even journalists, advertisers or insurance salesmen have a bad reputation. But it's absurd that we are governed by people we don't trust, who present us every day that we cannot trust them and that they're totally incompetent and do the opposite of what the people want. So, it's feared, they threaten with the will of the people. Yeah. That it cannot be much more sick for someone who's standing outside, but still the population is in many parts, well, agreeing, not really agreeing, but they arranged themselves with it. They tolerated it, they're tolerating it. Let's see how long. There's a little beautiful story, Joe. A local politician, sleeps, falls asleep early this morning, but suddenly he wakes up in the night and he sees at the foot of the bed the devil is sitting, and the devil says, "Hey, you're a good guy." And the politician still sees the devil and, "Oh, you're a good guy, I help you." And he says, "How can you help me?" "I take care of that you really get important, get the big jobs and do things that have to be done. And you are really, you can become chancellor at the end of the day. But you have to do something." And the politician says, "What do I have to do?" He says, "It costs the eye light of your children and the life of your parents." And the politician says, "Where's the hook?" This so brings it to the point. I got Technics, 3D printers. Chinese deliver luxury residential buildings out of the 3D printer. You don't know how it feels inside, but this is the future. So this house, it's just a subject as we had it with the cars. Here, suddenly, things are changing. In 2 days, within 2 days, a Chinese construction entrepreneur prints 3 stored houses, luxury houses. A 150-meter long printer produces the parts from recycled materials and reduces the cost. A Californian scientist accuses him of having stolen the concept. They also developed such. And they can produce the building parts, and it shows how incredible this change stands in front of our door, and what this all means for construction enterprises, for the industry and other parts. For so many aspects we cannot estimate. So I brought it for all those who say that things aren't changing. We experience tremendous changes in front of our door. Rapidly everything is changing. You said it well, and there you need this. The world says police needs heavy weapons. The boss of the inner minister conference demands equal weapons for police as terrorists have. He wants to bring heavy weapons to the police, and a whistleblower from America says every terrorist attack is inscenated by secret agencies, not every second, but everyone. So let's see what we think about this. And we don't need those people who fight against terrorists, but against people who are awakening. Under which circumstances would you, Joe, need such big weapons or 5 additional bodyguards? Under which circumstances? Only if I would be very much fear. And there we're standing, and combined with a very bad conscience. My last news I brought is very up to date. This morning I could restart my computer. I had an attack and had to set up the system for a new. And this message I've seen is this. It deserves to be mentioned. From the Welt, a man, a word, is the category. The good man, who says Goodman, deserves his shitstorm. The long way to the right. From the old family name, Goodman has become a swear word. You cannot use it anymore today. Goodman is a swear word that no sane people would use it. An expert explains it. Matthias Heine, top expert. He's not only a good man, he's a better man, I think. He explains it us. And he explains it why you cannot use it anymore. Attention. By extensive use by the wrong people, it had been made not usable. This gives us a chance. By over excessive use by the wrong people, it has been made unusable. Wow, this gives us a possibility. We could use the words that we don't want to use and make them unusable. And sometimes, yes, for the good people, only Nazis and idiots say this. And sometimes still people who have don't. Yeah. And he explains it with Mr. Karl Goodman, who would have been the name giver of this word, and explains how this word has been kidnapped. He summarizes, it is only sure that Goodman, since middle of the 90 years, has become a swear word. And there was a dictionary of someone who wanted to honor concern slang and winner kitsch, and parts of the left and former Greens,
mit einer endlosen Serie von
and
yeah. sich an eine vage, gefühltes, pathetisch, unscharf artikuliertes Unverständnis zurückgezogen hat, eines einen Satz nämlich so vollständig ist das Wort
so completely, totally, the left people lost charge of the word. In the last 15 years, it got in the possession of political groups with a spectrum from right-wing to stupid people. And here they put the labels, really. What's interesting is here pseudo-intellectual, how pseudo-intellectual they deal with it. But how was reacted to this was very beautiful. So who finds this news and the culture and the Welt magazine can maybe find the reactions, the comments to this, if they are not switched off. I wanted to bring them, but I did not. It would have been 20 pages. But I want to read 2 comments that express it, and they let hope and they give courage. This might be this way, but to me personally, I don't care what the author thinks, because a good man dreams of an ideal world where he thinks he wants to live in, but they are schizophrenic, because everyone who does not share their insights declare them as evil people, and I don't let them forbid my mouth. So here's a point to the children's world. The children's world says how things are going. And there's a second comment that you have to assault me in the morning by a self-called language policeman. This can only come from a good man who can what he thinks is the good and feels assaulted by everything which does not agree with his mind. So it's really getting out of the hands of things are getting out of the hands of those people who say us what's right and what's wanted and what's politically correct. Whatever this would have, those people have to show them the sticky fingers. So they fear sex. Prostitutes should satisfy asylum, whatever. Should not say it so often. In Upper Bavarian, Siegertsbrunn, it's a debate. Prostitutes should give free sex to the 100 refugees in this commune. So this a priest demands this. And if because he fears that if it won't be regulated this way, they would somehow in different ways attack women or whatever. So, but this is the solution of a good man, that they should offer free sex. And some said maybe the priest should offer his household helper for this. It's absurd. You cannot add anything to this. And it shows the absurdity. This news shows the absurdity, but it's astonishing that in the media, I want to interpret this, and people are being provoked here who normally would look away. So this news has the character of ridiculing, of provoking, of spitting in the face, that sometimes when this breakout comes, where they work to, they have a little bit oil into the fire. So you said spitting in the face. So here's a headline. It's not nice. It's a strategy of a think tank, and they are unscrupulous. The Stratfor head George Friedman said at the 4th February in the public conference in Chicago Council of Global Affairs. You found the video on the internet, but I just want to point what he said about Europe, that we here, since many years, had no war. It wouldn't have to stay this way, and it doesn't mean that America would see Europe as a whole. It could be, European countries could come to war against each other. And he said it even more clearly. I don't want to say anything wrong way. He said it more obvious. And I want to repeat that. He said it would be the strategy today of an empire that you don't have to do everything by violence, that others do it for them in the will of the empire, and that they don't want that those colonies sympathize amongst each other, but those singular, maybe as groups who could become dangerous to the empire, could be split up again. That's the story behind this, and he said it obviously. But for me, it's not surprising. Surprising is only that they pronounce it now. And that's what's only surprising if we look from our childish worldview, what they have told us, if we take it seriously, what they have told us up until now. So the ones who analyze as a historical scientist the movement of the last centuries know it had been always this way. It's totally not new. The way how they justify it is new, and the people on this part are more a little bit well-believing in the sense of good men. They are not really well-believing, they are only stupidified. They can only swallow that people are pressing into their throat. But it's interesting because the video, someone put it on YouTube because it's actually in the media, it's not been. It's totally interesting. It shows the quality of the media that we have, and internet. It was not planned this way by the military people. And the social networks, Facebook and so on, it's not what they had imagined. They thought that people would meet, but they also exchange such things in Facebook. It works differently than planned. So we just see obvious that things which are planned do not work as planned. There are dark things planned. They have big efforts to provide the energy for that, and we have to bleed all for that, but it does not work at all as they want to have it. As they don't want this way anymore, so they produce weapons and stuff, equip themselves with weapons and want us to attack each other, but it does not work either neither in the big scale as in the small scale that we attack each other. And for this they need energy, and this energy is not there anymore. And so a real global war needs preparation and resources, and needs the readiness, the low consciousness of the people. And we see that people don't want this anymore, clearly, and that the energetical spaces for that get less, and the pressure gets higher. And so what we see more absurdities don't mean power, it's a decrease in power, it's an expression of less power. What you see in the last quote, this military man said it internally, but always more gets into public, and we see how many people in those internal circles do not agree anymore and go through their own processes, and are a disturbing part of grain, or big wheel which is not turning anymore as they want. So we have a development, it cannot be separated. In here are the good ones, here are the bad ones, they want this and they want that. So it's a mixture we find. And out of this emerges what should emerge, and it's not voluntarily because we are all a little bit slow in a comfort mode, kept in a comfort mode even just here in the Western world, but now we have to get aware that what they had sold us has to be paid by a price that has to be paid now. The depths of the system or the guilt of the system. And let's see how the people are dealing with that. Those news are not to produce fear, just to show up. What things which could produce fear do not work anymore. This means you can save your fear. You don't have to have fear. It helps people to listen to us because we quite relaxed talk to things which could provoke fear, and people get relaxed about this and think, well, things will work out in not so negative ways. Do you have clues for energies right now? Directly for physical or people who have symptoms, what you can do. What you said was you said about nerve symptoms. Via the nerves, impulses are getting tangible for us. So nerves are being irritated. These impulses are tangible, feelable to us, not from the head recognizable, but we sense them through the body. So our nerves are irritated, maybe it's itching, maybe we feel a little bit warm, and the head cannot get a big picture of this. So for the head it's just a disturbance which brings me out of my concept. This brings me maybe to relaxation, that I cannot have to relax, I cannot work this way now. And this disturbances are an aspect of the movement we are part in now. And we just cannot easily grasp this with our common senses, and the irritation of nerves belongs to this, maybe just in those phases of the strong impulses. Those impulses even increase, and those senses can, those notions, perceptions can increase. And the typical movement is what we see as a stream of energy or a flow of energy. It's like a vibration in the body. Some people perceive it by hearing, listening, by tinnitus-like perception. So here energy is increasing, and this energetical increase is not really comfortable at the beginning. You first have to get to resonance to this finer or stronger energies, and you can partially take part in these energies and partially join these energies, and partially it's challenging, it's very much. So if you have this impression, just be in peace. Keep breaks, allow yourself some breaks, allow yourself to get to bed early, maybe to lie down. Don't have the claim to manage everything which could be managed, because at the moment there are many subjects come up which have to be managed, or which are there to manage. It can come in the outside or in the inside. When emotional subjects come up, they also cost energy. But in front of all, there are things sometimes where you want to would have managed things in advance earlier. My tax declaration, I have to do it whatever way you think. This is this way, and otherwise people would get angry with me. But you don't have to do everything maybe as it is wanted. There's many things you don't have to deny completely, because things have consequences, you know. How do you have the personality for that? But being to obey in advance because others expect, you can question this maybe. Do I have to meet all expectations? If there are obligations in the family, whatever, am I really obliged to fulfill those obligations, or do I just think that people would expect them from me? This is a little clue. I think you want to maybe add some things to this. But before I forget it, 2 dates. You have on the 12th of April your day seminar about how do I get my things, what does it mean for the values I have, I want to protect, or what does it mean if the system develops in this way further on, what can I do? And I want to point something where I say something at Rainer Feistle, and I think it's the 4th of April. It's Easter, directly before Easter, so it's also over now. Rainer Feistle, Feistle. He has a Congress, and I have a speech on this. So Joe Conrad, and I want to point that we need donations, so the public television stations get billions and have billions plus. And we need donations. The TV studios of the other ones are more gigantic with great screens. What does this cost? So we don't have this. We do it with our little equipment, and we are thankful if we could improve the service via technology, and it all costs money. And so please think of donations. We are thankful for that. And for the things people send us, we cannot bring everything. We cannot manage to send all of those. So what's a big conclusional word, a great conclusional word? So before we come to the conclusional word, I know. So I have another seminar, which is also over now, about new rearranging, becoming here in yourself. When we speak about becoming healed, we become aware that being healed means to be complete, and being complete means every aspect in us which not is in the central point of attention in our society, or points where we think we are good, but these are aspects that had no space up until now, aspects which become important and have a chance in this time now. In your form of own perception, it can be realized, where you say, I don't really have to work that well as a citizen for a pseudo-state, but I want to discover my own freedoms, to see what I could not live out since decades, maybe not as a child, that I can start painting or doing music or allowing myself a journey. So be generous to yourself to give aspects a space which had no room up until now. The self-expression is not this body anymore, or the writer or moderator Joe Conrad, this unlimited consciousness, a creative being. And you at your screen at home, of course, too. Then just look back, see what's actually mine, is the expectations of the agencies of the family, and so let this go and see what do I myself expect of myself, or do I have to expect anything from myself? It's also a question. Or the question, you have to do something, many do this, and we see that many things we would exhaust too much if we would rule it alone. Right? So we have things in our lives that we want to approach or have to, and there are many things that we actually don't have to clear ourselves, because we cannot do it and we can let it go. So some days ago I got an audiobook into my hand that had a very humorous title. It was if you don't buckle up, a unicorn dies. Clues for education. This is something they tell us. If you don't donate, then a child in India dies. If you don't do this, this happens. But we lose the overview over what really is connected to us, and this is ourselves. This is your life, which has been given to you, which you adjust, not as others would imagine, or that some cliches that have been conveyed to you, they would have been lived very well. It's time to free up from this, and here basically, and here's a clue you could be appropriate. In many teachings you see the imagination you would have to transcend your ego, that those attachments that are attached to the ego you would have to leave behind you and to recognize you in your divinity. But at the moment it's important to recognize your ego, because you can deal easily with that. Someone who doesn't even has recognized his ego cannot embrace it or let it go, because before you let something go you have to look what you want to let go. But if you want to let something go without seeing it, you must fail, and those aspects will grow towards us. This is what karma means. The aspects you couldn't see that grow towards you. This is the time where so many things are knocking that you could let go of so many things, that you could get overwhelmed by this, and we have a protection, and the protection lies also in creation. That creation, even if we wanted, we could not take part as well as we would like, and we could, if we are exhausted after the strong creation of the past, we should accept this exhaustion, draw back, listen to the inside, and use the energetic tools that we mentioned often. Meditation, burn incense, or being totally in the here and now. And being in the here and now heals every incident. We imagine them important incidents, you have to pass tests well or so on, but at once if you have done this test and passed this test and brought you back home and your mother says, great, you did it, then this moment is over. You find the next important moment and you oversee that every single incident is important and every single moment is important, and no following moment could take place if not the current moment would be present. So I recommend everyone to be totally in the here and now, to perceive the importance of the moment. Then healing happens by itself. Thank you.